Bob Chapman spent 3 years in the U.S. Army counterintelligence, mostly in Europe. He speaks German, French, and is conversant in Spanish. He lived in Europe for 6 years off and on, 3 years in Africa, a year in Canada, and a year in the Bahamas. That was the reward for all the other years, the Bahamas. Bob brings his more than 4 decades of experience to his publication of the International Forecaster, a compendium of information on business, finance, economics, and social and political issues worldwide. He has spoken at or given workshops to over 200 business conferences worldwide. He reaches 10 million people a week with his information. He's been with us before, and God willing, he'll be with us again in the future. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the Global Freedom Report, Mr. Bob Chapman.
Well, thank you very much, and it's very nice to be here again.
And it's a pleasure to have you. I know last week we missed you, and for a while there we were actually concerned that just by the very nature of your history that something untoward might have happened, and I'm glad to know it wasn't the case.
Well, thank you very much. They know I shoot back, so I think they think twice about coming after me.
The U.S. Congress just avoided a federal government shutdown, at least temporarily. But there are those who think we should just let the government shut down, that it would teach us invaluable lessons about what does and does not work in an economy. What are your thoughts on this? Economically speaking, would allowing a government shutdown be a good or bad idea?
It should have been done 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago now. And why? Because from a classical economic viewpoint, the system should be purged of malinvestment and bankruptcy. And all of the major banks, brokerage houses, many of the insurance companies are broke, not only here but in Western Europe and in England as well. And so, that said, that opportunity gone and past, they should do it now, but they're not going to do that. They're going to kick the can down the road, and they're going to extend everything as long as they can until they reach the point that they want to pull the plug on the whole thing. It is my opinion, and I'm right 98% of the time, that this whole thing was created deliberately in order to bring the people of Western Europe, England, the United States to their knees financially and economically so that they would be forced to accept world government. And that's what this is all about. And so this game that's being played, and it is a game to them, will come to a head, but I don't know when. But it's going to. And so by extending this power to borrow more money on a cash basis, it's fruitless. They know that. But they're going to do it anyway. And what they're getting at here is they want to cut and destroy Social Security and Medicare, things that we pay into. And the reason they want to do that is they don't want to cut military spending, which is the highest item, the most expensive, in the budget. That's 26% of all the money is spent on making war and killing people. And incidentally, I'm a veteran. And so this is the move that was just made by S&P saying, we're going to downgrade you unless you do something. That's supposed to impel Congress to cut the throats of old people and sick people. And that's what they're up to here. And yes, they should pull the plug on the budget extension, debt extension, but they won't. And they're going to put through anyway.
Now, just to play devil's advocate for a second, and we have a break coming, but let's see if we can get to this. Just to play devil's advocate for a second, if there was a shutdown, wouldn't that create a situation where more people would be more indigent and therefore more needy, and therefore the problem would precipitate itself and only get worse?
That's true. Maybe they don't want it at this time. If they didn't want the deficit extension, you wouldn't get it. They own Congress. 95% of the people in Congress are paid off, and they own the judicial system. I mean, try writing to these people. They'll even answer you.
Recently, Bernard von Nothaus was found guilty of counterfeiting under circumstances in which he was clearly innocent of the charges. He even had gone so far as to obtain letters in advance of marketing his Liberty dollars from the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Treasury, and Interpol, attesting to the fact that his private currency would not be considered counterfeit. As a former intelligence operative, would you comment on the numerous historic efforts to provide alternatives to the Federal Reserve's fiat currency and how they always end up shut down, frequently under questionable circumstances?
And desperate people do desperate things. And they're going to regret their finding against Mr. von Nothaus. The judge, of course, like most judges today, are in the pocket of somebody, and obviously this judge is in the pocket of the United States government. He gave instructions to the jury, which could only lead to him being found guilty. And it's like that in tax cases as well. There is no jurisprudence left in America, just like there's no access to Congress with the exception of a handful of people. And so we have a corporatist fascist government, and those of you who don't know that, don't believe that, will find out in time, much to your chagrin. And so they had to make an example of him. We discussed it by email previously. I told them what the government would do, and I said they can't allow you to do what you're doing. They want to make an example, just like they grab some Hollywood star or something in March and bring all kinds of charges against them for not paying their taxes or whatever, and try to scare people into paying their taxes if they're not thinking about paying them, or paying them more quickly or whatever, or not cheat. And so it's the same concept. You're dealing with criminals. And Washington, New York, London is a criminal syndicate. I worked there for 29 years and owned my own brokerage firm. I was the largest gold silver stockbroker in the world, so I know what I'm talking about. It's not like I read about it.
And you see,
I lived it.
When I say they're criminals, I mean it literally. And he worked there for years, so he knows.
And that's true. And so they had to make an example of the gentleman, and he is out on appeal. Whether he'll win that or not, I don't know. It probably will end up in the Supreme Court, and if they'll take the case, they're just as corrupt as the rest of the courts. And I won't even get into that. I characterize it as a swill bucket. But that's where that's going to go. But what he did do, he got people's attention, and he's terrorizing the terrorists. And I love it. And my hat goes off to him for doing what he did. Whether I could do that or not, I don't know. I've been too busy hiding from the government because they threatened to kill me. And so I think that, at least at this time, is better for me to stay incognito.
We each
fight the fight. The point here is that they were trying to make and send a message, and it didn't work.
And by the way, we each fight the fight as best we can under our respective circumstances. What Bernard has been doing, you're not supposed to be doing, and vice versa. Now, let me...
Well, I'm reaching hundreds of millions of people every week worldwide, and I think that's more important than having my neck on the guillotine.
Well, exactly. We each do what we have the ability to do. I have the ability to reach a lot of people through radio, you through your publication. Bernard is more on the front lines with his issue, and each of us is important in the overall fight. I want to know, because I don't really understand these things as well as I might, what the significance of this S&P downgrade of U.S. credit to negative is. What is this in terms of the U.S. economy and in terms of how it affects everyday, our everyday lives? Well,
first of all, if S&P and Moody's were ever going to do anything, It should have been done in September of 1971 because on August the 15th, we went off the gold standard. From there on out, it was all downhill. The dollar was worth 2% of what it was on August the 15th, 1971. Now 2 people have to work in order to keep a family at the same level as it was in 1971. And so what they've done is they've deliberately destroyed the dollar and enriched themselves in the process. And they brought the American public to their knees financially. Look what's going on around us. Real estate is down 32%. And it's going to get down another 20 and maybe more. There's hundreds of millions of houses for sale. It's incredible, the numbers. I mean, normally, houses for sale run 4 to 5 months inventory. It's 3.25 years right now. Just to give you an idea. Oh. If you're thinking of buying a house, don't. And this could go on for 20 or 30 years. You want to rent, no matter how high the rent, because you're going to lose more in the value of the property and your commitment on contract than you will by renting. So keep that in mind. And you can use that money that you would put down in a house to buy gold and silver so that you can keep your assets together while the depreciation of the dollar continues.
Now, on that note, how high do you think it's going to go? That's my question for the audience this year, but you might even answer it. How high do you believe the prices of gold and silver will go by the end of this year? We're already at 1,500 and I think 44 or 45.
Well, months ago, I called gold at $16.50 and silver at $50. And we're getting there.
So is that by the end of this year?
Well, back and fill. What's that?
Is that by the end of this year?
No. That's over the next month.
Oh, wow. Oh.
I haven't got to the end of the year yet. And I made this prediction, a number of months ago. And we'll back and fill there, probably drop back $50, $75, and the speculators can take their profits. And then by the end of the year, we'll move to 2,000. But there's a possibility we could go higher. As far as silver is concerned, unusual situation. I called it on the fundamentals back to 50. But we have something different going on. JPM, which is JP Morgan Chase, and HSBC, which is Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation, they are naked short 45 times more silver than they have. In fact, they don't have any silver. They call that being naked short. And they can't cover. They can't buy the silver back in order to pay the people who bought the contracts. So one of the three things is going to happen here. They're either going to have a partial default and say, well, we're going to pay you 25 or 50% of what your contract is, and we're going to pay you in dollars because we don't have any silver. Or they're going to default completely. Now, at this level, the number is about $85 billion underwater. At 60, it's $140 billion. The third thing they can do, and the largest shareholder of the Federal Reserve is JP Morgan Chase. And, of course, HSBC's in there, as well as Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, and on and on. They could have the Fed step in and pay the people off with dollars, which they would create out of thin air. Now, whether the American public's going to sit still for that, I don't know. At $60, it's $140 billion. What is it going to be at $100? And I don't see them acting. I don't see them doing anything. They still get the short position they had months ago. They've tried to cover it, but they can't. Because all the other pros and people who listen to programs like this know what's going on. So they just keep on buying silver. In the last few months, my silver position has gone up 130%. Not bad. And so this is where this is all headed. Where could silver go by the end of the year? Maybe to 100, maybe to 60.
Wow.
It's going to go higher because of this unusual situation. Naked short and can't cover.
Well, I'm going to hold on to my silver, that's for sure. I've always been a big fan of silver. Yes, gold is great and everything, but I've always been a big fan of silver, which is kind of fundamental to gold's value as well. Let's move on to politics a little bit. I want to tap your brain. First off, since we last spoke on the air, Libya has become a war zone. Ivory Coast is now the recipient of UN airstrikes. Egypt has reverted to tyranny under military rule. Saudi Arabia has for the time being fought off efforts to make it the latest Arab uprising front. What is going on in that part of the world? Why is all this happening now? And what can we expect over the next 3 to 12 months?
Well, 3 to 12 months, more of the same. Why was it created? It was created by the British, the Americans, and the French. Number one, they wanted to take people's eye off of the economic and financial problems in America, the UK, and Europe. America, you not only have a debt which is almost totally funded by the Federal Reserve, which makes that money out of thin air. You've got municipalities who are bankrupt, and there's going to be more of them. There'll be over 100. And then you have states that are bankrupt. I don't know what they're going to do about them. Then you have a colossal crisis in England. They don't know which way to run. And in Europe, you have 6 countries all ready to go bankrupt. And I think Greece very shortly, maybe in 3 to 4 weeks, might go bankrupt. And we get a lot of input from people in high places who are subscribers, who email me and tell me what's going on behind the scenes. So I get a real good look at things that other people don't. Getting back to the Middle East. So it was a diversion. They wanted to get people thinking about this Middle East situation and not about the financial and economic problems. So they brought down the Egyptian government. Mubarak many times had said he doesn't want to get involved in the invasion of Iran. And not only did he get taken out of his position, the people who took over are people who are on the U.S. and British payroll. So there's been no real change there. And they talk about the Muslim Brotherhood. What is that is a nationalist, religious, fascist organization founded and funded in the 1920s by the British government. In fact, during the Second World War, they sent 2 divisions of their best military people to fight on the Eastern Front next to Adolf Hitler's divisions against the Russians. Shows you where they're coming from. Tunisia, they wanted to change. Yemen, they want to change. Bahrain, I don't know, but I don't think so. Saudi, no. Qatar, no. They play both sides. Libya, lots of reasons. Mr. Gaddafi would not join. AFRICOM, which sent British and American intelligence into spasms. He previously wanted to nationalize oil and give shares to everybody in the country. And his advisors said, no, you can't do that.
Well, let me...
And of course...
Let me interrupt a second, as we're on the Libya end of it. You spent 3 years in Africa. I don't know if it was North or South Africa or both, but did you get a sense of the politics regarding Africa? We've got Tunisia. The latest now is Swaziland, Ivory Coast, Libya. What is significant about that part of the world that all this activity is going on?
It's all of Africa and the Middle East. They can't govern themselves. They can't use democracy or republic. They're incapable of doing it for whatever reason. And I lived in those places, so North Africa is awful. I wouldn't wish that on my worst friend. It's a horrible place, at least from my viewpoint. Southern Africa is different. There's beauty and same problems, but it's different. It's not hostile environment, whereas North Africa and the Middle East are. So Gaddafi, he was counseled not to do that. And of course, the counselors were taking their orders from the Queen of the Netherlands and the Queen of England, because they're the ones who have all the interest in the oil that's coming out of there. There are others, but they're the main ones. And so they decided this guy's got to go. And there's 4 aquifers under the country, which they want to get a hold of. Giant river that he's made from the aquifers. Of course, the oil, which is some of the best oil in the world. And he has an independent central bank, which the bankers in Europe want to get a hold of because they don't want anybody competing with them. Anybody. And within that bank...
And he's a military strategist, which is, so he knows how to defend what he has.
Yes. And within that bank, there's 143.5 tons of gold, which the British and the Americans want to steal so they can throw it into the market to drive prices down. The man who is running the rebel opposition has lived the last 20 years in Virginia. He's an employee of the Central Intelligence Agency. The people who are the rebels come from Al-Qaeda and Taliban, which is controlled by MI6 and the CIA.
And the CIA, yes.
And the president's asking today for $25 million to train and arm these people so that they can overthrow a government. And that is not what we should be doing.
Now, we only have a few minutes left. I have a couple of important questions I want to ask your opinion on. First one is China and Russia. Why have they been silent when it comes to these aggressive Security Council resolutions used to launch invasions? Ordinarily, they are staunch advocates of leaving internal matters alone, yet they have not vetoed either the Libyan or the very quickly passed Ivory Coast resolutions. What's going on with China and Russia?
I think they're trying to play their cards close to the vest. They don't want to get involved unless they have to, because they know it means Third World War. And, of course, their intelligence agencies know what the Americans and the British are doing. I used to spy against Russia, and I know how good they are. They're smart people, and they did a good job. Even though it was the USSR at the time, they were not quite as good as we were, and that's not wishful thinking. It's true, we were better. And but they're formidable. And Russians, Chinese people have never lived so well in their entire lives. And they don't want to stop that. So they're willing to bend, but they'll only bend so far. They want a new currency. They want it backed by gold. That's another fight.
Okay, now, my other question. Recently, Israel passed a Citizenship Act and a Loyalty Oath Act. These acts are reminiscent of Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime. Now, there's something very peculiar about the concept of Israeli Nazis, yet that is sure the way it is looking. What do you think we can expect from Israel over the rest of this year and into the next on all fronts? The idea is that many think they're going to go after Arabs living in Israel with these loyalty oath things that they just passed and revoke their citizenship. What's going on in Israel?
I've been writing about it for 44 years. I interrogated people who had been generals for the most part in the Wehrmacht and the SS in the early 1950s. And I had two...
Only got about 2 minutes here.
I had two people tell me that Adolf Hitler, during the 1930s, one of the first things he did was send people to Israel saying that they were Jewish and living there. And he sent a lot of them. And so it bears out what I've said and what you say. They're a bunch of Nazis. That's exactly what they are. They have nothing to do with Judaism or the average Jewish person. These are bad people.
I never heard that. That is the first time I ever heard any such thing.
And it's true, believe me.
It explains a lot. Oh, it explains a lot. We had a comment out of the chat room. June Cat mentioned that according to figures put up on Rumor Mill News, the military budget in the U.S. is only 3% of the budget. Could that be?
No, I think she better look at her research. I don't think that's correct.
Yeah, that seems a little bit low, but I don't know. She said she got it from Rumor Mill News. Some comments out of the chat room. First, just to acknowledge you, Bob. Bob sounds tired, but you got to admire his drive. He must do 35 radio shows a week, and he always has something to say. And it is hard to be exuberant all the time. So they hope that you're doing well, hope that you're not overdoing it, but they all appreciate your drive. And a comment from Methuselah about Liberty dollars are counter fiat. Very, very good, Methuselah. Bob, we are out of time, and it's never really enough time with you, but thank you for being there for all of us and helping us to assimilate all this important information. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you all for listening. And just let me know when you want me again, that's all.
Absolutely. For more information on Bob Chapman and the International Forecaster, go to www.theinternationalforecaster.com. Theinternationalforecaster.com. Bob, you take good care of yourself. We need to have you out there doing the things that you do.
No, thank you very much, and bye-bye.